The rain had turned the dusty street into a river of mud when Eliza Nolan stumbled into Sierra Vista, Arizona, with nothing but the tattered dress on her back and a hollow ache where hope used to live. It was the summer of 1878, and the unforgiving sun had baked the town into submission for weeks before this sudden downpour, as if the heavens themselves had finally taken pity on the parched earth below. Eliza kept her head down as she walked, not because of the rain, but because she had learned long ago that meeting people's eyes only invited cruelty. She had been called plain her entire life. Not ugly, they would say, as if that made it kinder. Just plain, unremarkable, forgettable. Her features were even enough. Her brown hair neither particularly lustrous nor dull. Her hazel eyes neither striking nor off-putting. She was simply ordinary in a world that seemed to demand either beauty or character so strong it could compensate for the lack thereof. And Eliza, raised by a bitter aunt who reminded her daily of her plainness, had never learned to cultivate that strength. The journey from Tucson had been brutal. She had been working as a seamstress in a dress shop, barely making enough to rent a corner of a room from a widow who charged too much and provided too little. When the shop owner's son had decided Eliza should be grateful for his unwanted attention, and she had refused, she found herself without employment and without lodging in the span of a single afternoon. The widow had no patience for women who could not pay rent, so Eliza had walked. She had hoped to find work in one of the smaller towns, somewhere she might be needed enough that her plain face would not matter. But each place she stopped had been the same. Doors closed in her face. Shopkeepers who took one look at her and said they had no positions. Women who saw her and immediately clutched their husbands' arms tighter, as if plainness might be contagious, or worse, as if they believed even a plain woman might be competition. Now, as the rain soaked through her thin dress and her boots squelched in the mud, Eliza felt the last of her strength draining away. She had not eaten in 2 days. Her limbs trembled with exhaustion. She passed a saloon where raucous laughter spilled out into the street, then a general store that was closing for the evening, its proprietor giving her a suspicious look before turning the sign and locking the door. She tried the boarding house next, climbing the steps to the covered porch with legs that barely supported her weight. A severe-looking woman answered her knock, took one look at Eliza's bedraggled appearance, and shook her head. "We are full," the woman said, though Eliza could see a sign in the window advertising available rooms. "Please," Eliza said, her voice hoarse from disuse and desperation. "I can work. I can clean, I can cook, I can sew. I just need a place to stay just for tonight." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You got money. I can earn it. I just need a chance." "No money, no room. That is how business works, girl. Now get off my porch before you track more mud everywhere." The door slammed in Eliza's face. She stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly, before she turned and descended the steps. The rain was letting up now, but the damage was done. She was soaked to the bone, shivering despite the warm summer air. She needed to find shelter, somewhere dry where she could rest, even if just for a few hours. She walked toward the edge of town where the buildings grew more sparse. There was a church, its white steeple pointing toward the darkening sky, but when she tried the door, it was locked. She sat on the steps for a while, huddled against the wall, but a man passing by told her to move along, that decent people did not want vagrants loitering about. Eliza wanted to tell him she was not a vagrant, that she was simply someone who had run out of luck, but she did not have the energy. She stood and kept walking. Beyond the last row of buildings, she could see a ranch in the distance. It was not a large spread, but it looked well maintained, with a sturdy house and a barn that appeared sound. Smoke rose from the chimney, a sign of warmth and life within. Eliza knew she should not bother whoever lived there, that she had already been rejected enough for one day, but her body was making the decision for her. Her feet carried her down the muddy road toward that distant house. By the time she reached the property, night had fallen. A lamp glowed in the window, golden and inviting. Eliza stood at the gate for a long time, trying to gather her courage. She had never been good at asking for help. Her aunt had taught her that asking was begging and begging was shameful. But what choice did she have now? She opened the gate and walked up to the house. Her hand shook as she raised it to knock. Before her knuckles could connect with the wood, the door swung open. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes that were a striking shade of blue. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30, and there was a strength to him that spoke of hard work and outdoor living. He was handsome in a rugged way that made Eliza immediately aware of her own plainness. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. Eliza opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was too tired, too defeated, her vision blurred at the edges. "Miss," the man stepped forward, concern creasing his brow. "Are you all right?" "I am sorry," Eliza managed to whisper. "I am sorry to bother you. I have nowhere." Her legs buckled. The man moved quickly, catching her before she hit the ground. Strong arms lifted her, and she was dimly aware of being carried inside, of warmth surrounding her, of a soft surface beneath her as she was laid down on something comfortable. "Easy now," the man's voice said from somewhere above her. "You are safe. Just rest." Eliza wanted to protest, to explain, to apologize again for the intrusion, but exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into darkness. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through a window, and she was lying in a real bed with clean sheets and a quilt tucked around her. For a moment, she thought she must be dreaming. Then she remembered the night before, the desperate walk through town, the ranch house, the man with blue eyes. She sat up quickly, panic flooding through her. Where was she? What had happened? She looked down and realized she was wearing a nightshirt that was far too large for her, and her dress was nowhere to be seen. The door opened, and the man from the night before entered, carrying a tray with a plate of food and a cup of what smelled like coffee. He stopped when he saw she was awake. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you do not mind, but your dress was soaked through. My sister's things are a bit large on you, but they are dry. I hung your dress by the fire. It should be ready soon." Eliza stared at him, unsure what to say. He set the tray down on a small table beside the bed. "You gave me quite a scare last night," he continued. "Collapsing on my doorstep like that. How long has it been since you have eaten?" "2 days," Eliza admitted quietly, his jaw tightened. "Well, that explains it. You need to eat. There are eggs and bacon here and some bread. The coffee is strong, but it will help." "I cannot pay you," Eliza said, her voice small. "I did not ask you to. But I cannot just take your charity. I am not a beggar." The man pulled up a chair and sat down, his blue eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "You came to my door in the middle of a storm, half-starved and about to collapse. That is not begging. That is survival. And offering help to someone in need is not charity. It is just being a decent human being." Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes. She could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to her with such kindness. "What is your name?" she asked. "Daniel Edwards," he said. "And you are Eliza Nolan." "Well, Eliza Nolan, you are welcome here for as long as you need. No strings attached. You can rest, get your strength back, and then decide what you want to do next." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" The question came out before she could stop it. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. About 5 years ago, my sister found herself in a bad situation. She had married a man who turned out to be cruel. She finally got the courage to leave him, but she had nothing, nowhere to go. She walked for days trying to find help, and everyone turned her away. She finally collapsed in a stranger's yard, much like you did last night. That stranger was a woman named Mary Chen. She took my sister in, no questions asked, helped her recover, and gave her a job in her restaurant. My sister worked there for 2 years before she met a good man and married him. They live in California now, happy and safe. Mary Chen saved her life. So when I see someone in need, I think of Mary and I think of my sister, and I do what I hope someone would do for them. Eliza felt the tears spill over. She wiped at them quickly, embarrassed. I am sorry. I do not usually cry. You have nothing to apologize for. Now eat. You need to build your strength. Eliza picked up the fork with a trembling hand and began to eat. The food was simple but delicious, and she had to force herself to eat slowly, to not make herself sick by consuming too quickly. Daniel sat with her while she ate, not saying much. Just a quiet presence that was oddly comforting. When she had finished, he took the tray and told her to rest more if she needed to. But Eliza felt restless now that she had eaten. She got out of bed, finding the borrowed clothes folded neatly on a chair. The dress was indeed too large, but it was clean and soft, worn with love. She put it on and ventured out of the room. The house was small but well kept. There was a main room with a fireplace, a simple kitchen area, and what appeared to be 2 bedrooms. Her dress hung by the fire and she touched it, finding it almost dry. Through the window, she could see the barn and corrals, and beyond that, open land dotted with cattle. Daniel came in from outside, his boots leaving marks on the floor. He saw her and smiled. You are up. How do you feel? Better, much better, thank you. Your dress should be ready in an hour or so. In the meantime, would you like to sit outside? It is a nice morning. They sat on the porch, and Daniel told her about the ranch. He had inherited it from his father 3 years ago and had been working to build it up ever since. It was not a large operation, just him and a hired hand named Pete who came by a few days a week to help with the heavier work. He ran cattle mostly, with a few horses. It is a lot of work for one man, Eliza observed. It is, Daniel agreed, but I like it. I like the independence, the connection to the land. My father loved this place and I want to honor that. What about your mother? She passed when I was young. My father raised my sister and me on his own. He was a good man. Daniel's voice held a note of sadness but also deep respect. They talked for a while longer, and Eliza found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. Daniel was easy to talk to, and he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. When she told him about her situation, about losing her job and her lodging, he listened without judgment. So you walked all the way from Tucson? He asked, his tone incredulous. I did not have money for the stage, and I kept hoping I would find work in one of the towns along the way. But you did not. No, people took one look at me and decided I was not worth the trouble. Daniel frowned. What do you mean, took one look at you? Eliza felt her cheeks heat. I am plain. People do not like plain women. They think we are either trouble or not worth the effort. Plain. Daniel studied her face, his expression puzzled. I do not see plain when I look at you. You do not have to be kind. I am not being kind. I am being honest. You have a good face. It is an honest face. That is worth more than beauty any day. Eliza did not know what to say to that. She had spent her entire life being told she was plain, being treated as less because of it. The idea that someone might see her differently was almost too much to process. Before she could respond, a horse and rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. Daniel stood, shading his eyes against the sun. That is Pete, he said. He is early today. Pete turned out to be a grizzled older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. He tipped his hat to Eliza when Daniel introduced them and did not ask intrusive questions, though his gaze was curious. "I will let you two get to work," Eliza said. "Is there anything I can do to help around the house, to earn my keep?" Daniel looked like he wanted to argue, but Eliza raised a hand. "Please, I need to feel useful. I cannot just sit around and do nothing." "All right," Daniel relented. "If you are feeling up to it, the kitchen could use some tidying. And if you know how to make bread, I would not say no to fresh bread. I have been living on whatever I can throw together, and it has been less than impressive." Eliza spent the day cleaning and organizing the kitchen, which was indeed in need of attention. She found flour and yeast and set about making bread, the familiar process soothing her still frayed nerves. By the time Daniel and Pete came in for lunch, the house smelled of baking bread, and Eliza had managed to put together a simple stew from ingredients she found in the larder. Pete's eyes widened when he saw the spread. "Well now, this is a sight better than the usual fare around here. Daniel, you might want to consider keeping this one around." Daniel shot him a look, but Pete just grinned. They ate together, and Eliza found herself enjoying the easy camaraderie between the two men. Pete told stories about the ranch and the surrounding area, and Daniel added his own comments, the two of them clearly comfortable with each other. After lunch, Pete went back to work and Daniel helped Eliza clear the dishes. "You did not have to do all this," he said. "You should have been resting." "I wanted to. It felt good to be useful again." Daniel dried a plate, his movements methodical. "How long were you planning to stay?" "I meant what I said about you being welcome, but I imagine you have plans." Eliza hesitated. The truth was, she had no plans. She had been running on desperation and hope, and now that she had found a safe place, she realized she had no idea what to do next. "I do not know," she admitted. "I need to find work, but I am not sure where. I had thought Sierra Vista might have opportunities, but after yesterday, I am not hopeful." "What kind of work do you do?" "I am a seamstress, or I was. I am good with a needle and I can do alterations and repairs." "But most dress shops want women who can also model the clothes and I—" She trailed off, not wanting to say it again. "You are plain," Daniel finished for her, his tone skeptical. "Right, except I still do not see that, but I take your point. Sierra Vista is a small town. There is a dress shop, but I do not know if they are hiring. There is also the boarding house, the hotel, the saloon, and a few other businesses. Maybe one of them could use help. The boarding house already turned me away. That would be Mrs. Fletcher. She is a tough one, but she is also practical. If you can show her you are a hard worker, she might reconsider." Eliza doubted that, but she did not say so. Instead, she asked, "What about ranches? Do any of them need a cook or a housekeeper?" Daniel considered this. "The Harrison Ranch might. They are a larger operation, and I know they have been struggling to keep staff. It is about 10 miles north of here. I could take you there if you want, introduce you to Tom Harrison." "You would do that, of course." "Like I said, you are welcome here, but I understand wanting to make your own way. I respect that." Over the next few days, Eliza settled into a routine at the ranch. She would wake early and make breakfast for Daniel and Pete, then spend the day tending to the house and preparing meals. In the evenings, she and Daniel would sit on the porch and talk, and Eliza found herself looking forward to those conversations more and more. Daniel was unlike anyone she had ever met. He was kind without being condescending, strong without being overbearing. He treated her as an equal, asking her opinions on everything from the best way to organize the kitchen to what she thought about the political climate in the territory. He listened when she talked, really listened, and he remembered the things she said. For her part, Eliza found herself fascinated by Daniel. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that often caught her off guard. He loved the land and the animals with a passion that was evident in everything he did. And he was lonely, she realized. Not in a desperate way, but in the quiet way of a man who had spent too much time alone and had forgotten what it was like to have someone to share his days with. On the fourth day, Daniel hitched up the wagon and drove Eliza to the Harrison ranch. It was a beautiful morning, the sky a brilliant blue and the air filled with the scent of sage and creosote. As they traveled, Daniel pointed out landmarks and told her about the area. The Harrison ranch was indeed larger than Daniel's, with a sprawling main house and several outbuildings. Tom Harrison turned out to be a man in his 50s with a booming voice and a hearty laugh. He greeted Daniel warmly and listened politely as Daniel explained Eliza's situation. "A housekeeper, you say?" Tom scratched his chin. "Well, we could use one, that is for sure. My wife passed last year and the place has been falling apart without her. My daughters try, but they have their own families to tend to. What can you do, Miss Nolan?" Eliza listed her skills, and Tom seemed impressed. But then his wife's sister appeared, a woman named Constance who looked Eliza up and down with a critical eye. "She is very plain, Tom," Constance said bluntly. "Are you sure you want her around? People will talk." "Talk about what?" Tom asked, confused. "About you hiring a plain woman to live in your house. They will think you have improper intentions." Tom's face reddened. "That is ridiculous. She would be an employee, nothing more. Nevertheless, appearances matter. I think you should look for someone else. Someone older, perhaps, or someone more suitable." Eliza felt her heart sink. Even here, even when she had skills and experience, her plainness was an obstacle. Daniel, who had been silent up to this point, spoke up. "Mrs. Constance, with all due respect, Miss Nolan is a hard worker and a skilled seamstress and cook. She has been helping at my ranch for the past few days, and I can vouch for her character. If Mr. Harrison needs someone, he would be hard-pressed to find better." Constance sniffed. "Well, Daniel Edwards, you are a bachelor. What do you know about hiring household help? I am simply looking out for my brother-in-law's reputation." "I appreciate that, Constance," Tom said, though he sounded weary, "but I can make my own decisions. Miss Nolan, I would be happy to have you if you are willing. The pay is fair, and you would have your own room in the house. You would be responsible for cooking, cleaning, and general household management." Eliza wanted to accept. It was exactly the kind of position she needed. But Constance's words stung, and she could see the doubt in Tom's eyes now, the worry that perhaps his sister-in-law was right. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," Eliza said quietly. "But I think Mrs. Constance may have a point. I do not want to cause you any trouble. Perhaps it would be best if I looked elsewhere." "Now, Miss Nolan, do not be hasty," Tom began, but Eliza shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, truly, but I think it is for the best." On the ride back to Daniel's ranch, Eliza was silent, fighting back tears of frustration. Daniel kept glancing at her, his jaw tight. "That was wrong," he finally said. "What Constance said, it was wrong and cruel. It was the truth. I am plain and people judge me for it. That is just the way things are. It is not right, though. No, it is not. But knowing that does not change anything." They rode in silence for a while. Then Daniel said, "Stay." Eliza looked at him, startled. "What? Stay at the ranch with me? Not as a guest, but as a partner. You have been doing the cooking and the housekeeping, and it has made a world of difference. The place feels like a home again. I can pay you wages, the same as Tom Harrison was offering, maybe more. You would have your own room and you would be safe. And I promise, I would never do anything to compromise your reputation or make you uncomfortable." "Daniel, I cannot." "People would talk, just like Constance said." "Let them talk. I do not care what they think. This is my ranch, my home. If I want to hire someone to help me run it, that is my business. And you need a place to stay, a place where you are valued. So stay, please." Eliza wanted to say yes so badly it hurt, but she also knew the reality of the situation. "You are kind to offer, but you should think about it. If people think poorly of you because of me, it could affect your business, your standing in the community." "Eliza, I am not asking you to think about my reputation. I am asking you to think about what you need. You need a safe place to live and work where you are appreciated. I am offering that. Please just consider it." She did consider it. She thought about it all evening and into the night. The truth was, she was happier at Daniel's ranch than she had been anywhere in a long time. She felt useful and valued, and she enjoyed Daniel's company more than she wanted to admit. The next morning, she found Daniel in the barn, feeding the horses. "I will stay," she said. "If the offer is still open." Daniel turned to her, his face breaking into a smile that made her heart skip. "It is, it absolutely is, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to be paid fairly, and I want the arrangement to be clear. I am your employee, and I will work hard to earn my keep. And if at any point you change your mind or if the situation becomes untenable, you will tell me, and I will leave without argument." "Agreed, though I do not foresee changing my mind." They shook hands, and Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had a home, at least for now, and she had a chance to build something, to prove to herself and everyone else that she was more than just a plain face. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Eliza took over all the household duties, and she did so with a dedication that impressed both Daniel and Pete. She kept the house spotless, cooked meals that were hearty and delicious, and even began tending a small garden behind the house, growing vegetables and herbs. Daniel, for his part, worked the ranch with renewed energy. He appreciated coming home to a clean house and a hot meal, but more than that, he appreciated the companionship. He and Eliza would spend their evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. He learned about her childhood, about the aunt who had raised her after her parents died in a cholera outbreak, about the loneliness of never feeling pretty enough or worthy enough. "Your aunt sounds like a miserable woman," Daniel said one evening after Eliza had shared a particularly painful memory. "She was, but she was also the only family I had. I think she resented having to take me in. She never let me forget that I was a burden." "You are not a burden. You never were." Eliza looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I see how hard you work, how much you care about everything you do. Anyone would be lucky to have you in their life." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something Eliza could not quite name. She wanted to believe him, but years of being told otherwise were hard to overcome. As summer turned to fall, Eliza began to venture into town with Daniel on supply runs. At first she was nervous, expecting the same cold reception she had received before. And indeed, some people did look at her with suspicion or dismissal. But others, particularly those who knew Daniel, were kind. The shopkeeper at the general store greeted her warmly, and the woman who ran the bakery complimented her on the bread she had brought to trade. Slowly, Eliza began to feel like she belonged. Not because people suddenly saw her as beautiful, but because she was proving her worth in other ways. She was competent and reliable, and that mattered. One evening in late September, Daniel came home from town with news. "There is going to be a dance at the community hall next Saturday," he said. "The whole town is invited. I was thinking we could go." Eliza's stomach tightened. "A dance?" "I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I do not dance, and people will talk if we go together." "People are already talking, Eliza. They see you with me when we come to town. A few have asked if you are my housekeeper, and I have told them yes. No one seems scandalized. As for dancing, I am not exactly graceful myself, but it could be fun. Eliza wanted to refuse, but the hopeful look in Daniel's eyes made her hesitate. I do not have anything to wear. My old dress is worn, and your sister's things are too big. Then make something. You are a seamstress, are you not? There is fabric in the trunk in the spare room, left over from when my mother used to sew. You are welcome to use it. Eliza found the trunk and opened it to reveal bolts of beautiful fabric in various colors and patterns. She chose a deep blue cotton that reminded her of the Arizona sky at dusk, and set to work. She had not sewn a dress for herself in years, always prioritizing practical repairs over anything frivolous, but she found the process soothing. She worked on it in the evenings after her other chores were done, and Daniel would watch her sometimes, a small smile on his face. "You are very talented," he said one night as she stitched the hem. "It is just a simple dress." "It is beautiful. You made it beautiful." The night of the dance arrived, and Eliza dressed carefully, her hands trembling slightly. The dress fit her well, and for the first time in a long time, she felt almost pretty. Not beautiful, but perhaps not quite as plain as she had always believed. Daniel was waiting for her in the main room, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed shirt. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Eliza," he breathed, you look wonderful." She felt her cheeks heat. "Thank you, you look very nice as well." The community hall was already crowded when they arrived. A small band was playing lively music, and people were dancing and laughing. Eliza felt a flutter of nervousness as they entered, but Daniel kept a steady hand at her elbow, guiding her through the crowd. They were greeted by several people, including Tom Harrison, who apologized for his sister-in-law's behavior and said he was glad to see Eliza looking so well. Pete was there too, dancing with a widow named Martha, and he gave them a friendly wave. Daniel led Eliza to the refreshment table where they got punch and stood watching the dancers. The music was infectious, and Eliza found her foot tapping along. "Would you like to dance?" Daniel asked. "I told you I do not know how." "Neither do I, really, but we can figure it out together." Before she could protest further, he took her hand and led her onto the floor. The dance was a simple reel, and while Eliza stumbled at first, Daniel was patient, guiding her through the steps. Soon she was laughing, the joy of movement and music overriding her self-consciousness. They danced several more dances, and Eliza found herself having more fun than she had in years. Daniel was not a polished dancer, but he was enthusiastic, and his enjoyment was contagious. During a slower dance, he pulled her closer, and Eliza felt her breath catch. His hand was warm on her waist, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm on his chest. "I am glad you came tonight," he said softly. "I am too. Eliza, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" But before he could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A group of men had entered, and they were clearly drunk and looking for trouble. One of them, a tall man with a scarred face, was shouting about something, his words slurred. Daniel's expression darkened. "That is Clyde Mason," he said quietly. "He is bad news. I should go see what is going on." He released Eliza and moved toward the group, along with several other men. Eliza watched anxiously as they tried to calm the situation. Clyde was shouting about being cheated at cards, and he was demanding satisfaction from a man Eliza did not recognize. The confrontation grew heated, and for a moment, it looked like it might turn violent. But Daniel and the others managed to usher Clyde and his friends outside, diffusing the situation before it escalated. When Daniel returned to Eliza, he looked frustrated. "I am sorry about that. Clyde is always causing problems when he has had too much to drink." Is everything all right? For now, but I think maybe we should head home. The mood is spoiled anyway. On the ride back to the ranch, Daniel was quiet, his jaw tight. Eliza could sense his frustration and wished she knew how to help. "What were you going to tell me?" she asked, before we were interrupted. Daniel glanced at her, then back at the road. "It can wait. It is not the right time. Daniel, please, you can talk to me." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I was going to tell you that I have feelings for you. That over these past months, you have become so much more to me than just someone who helps around the ranch. You have become my friend, my confidante, someone I look forward to seeing every single day. And I know it is probably inappropriate, given that I am your employer and I do not want to make you uncomfortable, but I could not keep it to myself anymore." Eliza's heart felt like it might burst. "Daniel," she whispered, "you do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I just wanted you to know, and if it makes things awkward if you want to leave, I will understand. I will even help you find another position somewhere you can be happy. But I had to be honest with you." "I do not want to leave," Eliza said, "and you have not made me uncomfortable. The truth is, I have feelings for you too. I have been trying not to, because I thought it was foolish. I thought you could never see me as anything more than a plain woman who needed help. But if you are saying you feel the same way I do, then I do not want to hide it anymore." Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "You are not plain, Eliza. You are beautiful. Not in the way people usually think of beauty, maybe, but in all the ways that matter. You are kind and strong and talented. You make me laugh. You make me think. And when I see you, I do not see plainness. I see someone I could love for the rest of my life." Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then people have been blind." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. Then, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, and Eliza felt like her entire world had shifted. All the years of feeling unwanted, unworthy melted away in that moment. She was wanted, she was worthy, and she was loved. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We should probably get home," Daniel said, his voice a bit unsteady. "Yes, we should." But neither of them moved for a long moment, content to simply sit there together under the vast Arizona sky. The next few months were the happiest of Eliza's life. She and Daniel courted in the old-fashioned sense, taking walks together, sharing meals, talking late into the night. Daniel was respectful of her propriety, never pushing for more than she was comfortable with, and Eliza appreciated that more than she could say. They also faced challenges. There were people in town who disapproved of their relationship, who whispered that Daniel could do better or that Eliza was taking advantage of him. Mrs. Fletcher from the boarding house was particularly vocal, spreading rumors that Eliza was a gold digger who had trapped poor Daniel Edwards. But Daniel did not care. He defended Eliza fiercely, making it clear to anyone who would listen that he loved her, and that anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with him directly. Most people backed down quickly when confronted with Daniel's determination. Pete was their staunchest supporter. "About time you two figured it out," he said one day when Daniel told him they were officially courting. "I have been watching you moon over each other for months. It was getting painful." Eliza laughed. "Were we really that obvious?" "As obvious as a bull in a china shop. But I am happy for you both. You are good for each other." As winter approached, Daniel asked Eliza to marry him. They were sitting on the porch, bundled in blankets against the evening chill, and he simply turned to her and said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Eliza did not hesitate. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in the spring of 1879 in a small ceremony at the church in Sierra Vista. Eliza wore a dress she had made herself, a beautiful cream-colored gown with delicate lace at the cuffs and collar. Daniel wore a new suit, and his eyes were bright with emotion as he watched her walk down the aisle. Pete stood as Daniel's best man, and Martha, the widow Pete had been courting, stood with Eliza. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed her with a tenderness that made Eliza's heart soar. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food that Eliza and Martha had prepared together. Neighbors and friends came to celebrate, and even some of the people who had been skeptical of their relationship seemed to have come around. Tom Harrison gave a toast wishing them happiness, and Pete told embarrassing stories about Daniel that had everyone laughing. That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Daniel carried Eliza over the threshold of their home. She laughed, telling him it was silly, but he insisted. "This is our home now," he said, "our life together, and I want to start it right." Their marriage was everything Eliza had never dared to hope for. Daniel was a loving and attentive husband, and he treated her with a respect and affection that never wavered. They worked the ranch together, with Eliza taking on more responsibilities as she learned the business. She discovered she had a knack for managing the books and negotiating prices, and Daniel relied on her input more and more. By the summer of 1880, Eliza was pregnant. She and Daniel were overjoyed, though also nervous. They had heard stories of childbirths gone wrong, and both of them prayed that everything would go smoothly. Eliza's pregnancy was healthy, though she suffered from morning sickness in the early months. Daniel was attentive, making sure she rested and ate well, and he took over some of her heavier chores without complaint. In February of 1881, Eliza gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, but with the help of a midwife from town and Daniel by her side, she brought their baby girl into the world. They named her Grace, and she had Daniel's blue eyes and a head of dark hair. Daniel was a devoted father from the start. He would spend hours holding Grace, talking to her softly, marveling at her tiny fingers and toes. Eliza would watch them together, her heart so full of love she thought it might burst. "She is perfect," Daniel would say over and over. "She is," Eliza would agree. As Grace grew, she proved to be a happy and curious child. By the time she was a year old, she was toddling around the ranch, following Daniel and Eliza everywhere. Pete adored her, carving her little wooden animals and letting her ride on his shoulders. In the fall of 1882, Eliza gave birth again, this time to a son they named Samuel. Samuel was a quieter baby than Grace had been, but he was just as loved. Daniel now had his hands full with 2 children, and he joked that he was outnumbered. "You said you wanted a family," Eliza reminded him one evening as they watched Grace and Samuel play on the floor. "I did, and I have one. The best family I could have asked for." Life on the ranch was not without its challenges. There were droughts and hard winters, times when money was tight and they had to make difficult decisions. But through it all, Eliza and Daniel faced each obstacle together, their love and partnership only growing stronger. Pete eventually married Martha, and they built a small house on the edge of Daniel's property. The 2 couples became inseparable, sharing meals and celebrations, helping each other through tough times. Grace and Samuel grew up calling Pete and Martha aunt and uncle, and they were spoiled with affection. As the years passed, Eliza sometimes thought back to that rainy night when she had stumbled onto Daniel's property, desperate and defeated. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to believing that she would never find a place where she belonged. But she had found it. She had found a home, a family, a love that defied all the cruel voices that had told her she was not enough. She had learned that her worth was not determined by her appearance, but by her character, her kindness, her strength. Daniel would often tell her she was beautiful, and over time, Eliza began to believe him. Not because her face had changed, but because she saw herself through his eyes, through the eyes of her children, through the eyes of people who loved her. And in their eyes, she was more than enough. One evening in the summer of 1885, Eliza and Daniel sat on the porch as they had so many times before, watching the sun set over their land. Grace and Samuel were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the warm evening air. Pete and Martha were due to arrive soon for dinner. "Do you ever think about that night?" Eliza asked. "When I showed up on your doorstep, all the time," Daniel said. "It was the best night of my life," Eliza laughed. "The best night I collapsed on your porch. And you have been here ever since. You changed my life, Eliza. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. You saved mine. If you had not opened that door, I do not know what would have happened to me." Daniel took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I am glad I was there, and I am glad you took a chance on me. It was not much of a chance. You were kind from the very beginning. And you were brave. It takes courage to ask for help, to keep going when everything seems impossible. You have always been braver than you gave yourself credit for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and true. Their love had not been instantaneous or dramatic, but it had grown steadily, rooted in respect and friendship and a deep understanding of each other. As night fell and stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Daniel pulled Eliza close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative, and they had come out stronger on the other side. "I love you," Eliza whispered. "I love you too," Daniel replied. "Always." And in that moment, surrounded by the life they had built together, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was home. The years continued to unfold with the kind of steady happiness that Eliza had once thought was reserved for other people, for those who were prettier or luckier or somehow more deserving. But she had learned that happiness was not a gift bestowed on the fortunate. It was something you built with your own hands, something you fought for and nurtured and protected. By 1887, the ranch had grown considerably. Daniel had been able to purchase additional land from a neighboring rancher who was retiring, and their herd had expanded. They now employed 2 full-time ranch hands in addition to Pete, who had become more of a partner than an employee. The house had been expanded as well, with an additional bedroom and a larger kitchen that Eliza had designed herself. Grace was now 6 years old and showing signs of being as independent and strong-willed as her mother. She followed Daniel around the ranch whenever she could, begging to help with the animals. Samuel, at 5, was more reserved, but he had a quick mind and was already learning to read, poring over the few books they had with an intensity that both delighted and amazed Eliza. In the spring of that year, Eliza discovered she was pregnant again. She was both thrilled and apprehensive. 2 children had already stretched their resources and energy, and she worried about whether they could handle a third. But Daniel was overjoyed, and his enthusiasm was infectious. "We will manage," he assured her. "We always do, and our children are the best thing we have ever done." This pregnancy was easier than the previous 2, and in November, Eliza gave birth to another daughter. They named her Rose, and she had Eliza's hazel eyes and a sweet disposition that charmed everyone who met her. Grace immediately took on the role of big sister with an earnestness that was both endearing and occasionally overwhelming. She wanted to help with everything, from feeding Rose to changing her diapers, and Eliza had to gently remind her that the baby needed to sleep sometimes too. Samuel was more reserved about the new addition, but Eliza would often find him sitting quietly beside Rose's cradle, watching her sleep with a protective expression on his young face. Life was busy and chaotic, but it was also full of love and laughter. The house was never quiet anymore, and while there were times when Eliza longed for a moment of peace, she would not have traded it for anything. One afternoon in the early summer of 1888, a stranger arrived at the ranch. He was a well-dressed man in his 40s, riding a fine horse and carrying himself with an air of authority. Daniel met him at the gate, and Eliza watched from the porch, curious. The man introduced himself as Walter Preston, a lawyer from Tucson. He had been searching for Eliza for several months, he said, and had finally tracked her to Sierra Vista. Eliza felt a flutter of anxiety. "What does a lawyer want with me?" she asked when Daniel brought him to the house. Walter Preston removed his hat and gave her a respectful nod. "Mrs. Edwards, I apologize for the intrusion. I represent the estate of Miriam Talbot. Do you know that name?" Eliza frowned, searching her memory. "Miriam Talbot, I do not think so. She was your mother's sister, your aunt on your mother's side." Eliza's eyes widened. "I had an aunt." "Besides the one who raised me?" "Yes. Miriam was your mother's younger sister. She married a wealthy merchant and moved to California many years ago. She lost contact with the family, but she never forgot about you. When she heard about your parents' deaths, she tried to find you, but your other aunt, Beatrice, refused to tell her where you were." "Beatrice," Eliza said bitterly. "That sounds like something she would do." "Miriam passed away 6 months ago," Walter continued. "In her will, she left a considerable sum of money to you, along with several properties. She wanted to make sure you were taken care of, even though she never got the chance to know you." Eliza was stunned. "How much money are we talking about?" Walter named a sum that made both Eliza and Daniel gasp. It was more money than they could earn from the ranch in a decade, possibly longer. "This cannot be real," Eliza said, her voice shaking. "Why would she leave me anything? She did not even know me." "She felt guilty for not doing more to help you after your parents died. She tried to make amends in the only way she could. The money is yours, Mrs. Edwards, no strings attached. I have the paperwork here for you to sign, and the funds will be transferred to your account." Eliza looked at Daniel, who was staring at her with a mixture of shock and joy. "What do we do?" she asked. "It is your money, Eliza. You decide." They spent the rest of the afternoon with Walter, going over the details of the inheritance. In addition to the money, Miriam had left Eliza 2 properties in California, both of which could be sold or rented. The total value of the estate was staggering. After Walter left, Eliza and Daniel sat in stunned silence. Grace and Samuel were playing outside, and Rose was napping in her cradle, oblivious to the life-changing news. "We could do anything," Daniel said finally. "We could expand the ranch, buy more land. We could travel, see places we have only read about. We could ensure the children have the best education money can buy." "We could," Eliza agreed. "But do we want to? We have a good life here. I do not want to lose that." Daniel took her hands in his. "We will not lose anything. This money does not change who we are. But it does give us options, security. We can make sure the children are provided for. We can help Pete and Martha if they need it. We can contribute to the community, help build a school or a church. We can do a lot of good." Eliza thought about it. She had spent so much of her life in poverty and uncertainty. The idea of having financial security was almost overwhelming, but she also knew that money alone did not bring happiness. She had learned that the hard way. "I want to use it wisely," she said finally. I want to invest in the ranch, make it more prosperous. I want to set aside funds for the children's futures. And I want to help others, people who are in the situation I was in, people who need a chance. That sounds perfect, Daniel said, pulling her into an embrace. Over the next few months, they put the money to work. They expanded the ranch further, purchasing quality breeding stock and improving their infrastructure. They hired additional help, which took some of the burden off Daniel and Pete. They also donated money to build a new school in Sierra Vista, one that would provide education to all the children in the area, regardless of their family's financial situation. Eliza also started a small fund to help women in need, providing money and resources to those who were struggling. It was her way of honoring the memory of her Aunt Miriam and of giving back to the community that had ultimately accepted her. The inheritance brought changes, but it did not change the core of who they were. Daniel was still the hardworking, kind man Eliza had fallen in love with. She was still the same woman who had arrived on his doorstep with nothing but hope and desperation. They were still partners, still deeply in love, still committed to building a life together. In the fall of 1889, tragedy struck. Pete, who had been like a father figure to Eliza and a brother to Daniel, suffered a heart attack while working in the fields. He died before they could get him to the doctor, and his loss devastated them all. Martha was inconsolable, and Eliza spent days with her, helping her through her grief. Daniel and the ranch hands took care of the funeral arrangements, and it seemed like the entire town turned out to pay their respects. Pete had been well loved, and his absence left a hole in all their lives. For weeks after, the ranch felt empty without Pete's presence. Grace and Samuel asked about him constantly, not understanding why Uncle Pete was not there anymore. Eliza tried to explain death in terms they could understand, but it was difficult. Daniel struggled with the loss as well. Pete had been his friend and confidante, someone he could rely on no matter what. Without him, Daniel felt adrift. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Eliza said, "He would not want us to give up. He loved this ranch, loved what we built here. The best way to honor him is to keep going, to keep making this place thrive." Daniel nodded, his eyes wet. "I know, it is just hard. It is, but we will get through it, we always do." They did get through it, though it took time. Martha eventually moved into town, unable to bear living in the house she had shared with Pete. But she remained close to Eliza and Daniel, visiting often and maintaining the deep friendship they had formed. The children grew, and the ranch prospered. By 1892, Grace was 11 and already showing an aptitude for ranching that rivaled her father's. She could ride better than most of the ranch hands and had a way with the animals that was almost uncanny. Samuel, at 10, was more interested in books and learning, and Eliza and Daniel discussed sending him to a boarding school in the East where he could get a better education. Rose, at 4, was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by everyone. One evening, as Eliza was putting Rose to bed, the little girl asked, "Mama, were you always happy?" Eliza paused, surprised by the question. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Papa says you came here when you were sad and he made you happy. Is that true?" Eliza smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Rose's face. "It is true. I was very sad once, but your papa helped me find happiness. And then you and your brother and sister made me even happier." "I am glad you are happy now," Rose said, yawning. "Me too, my love, me too." After Rose was asleep, Eliza found Daniel in their bedroom, preparing for bed. She told him about the conversation, and he smiled. "She is a perceptive one, our Rose. She is. But it made me think about how far we have come. Sometimes I forget how different my life could have been." Daniel pulled her close. "You were always meant to be here with me. I believe that. I believe it too." In 1893, Daniel and Eliza celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. They threw a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors. The house was full of laughter and music, and as Eliza looked around at all the people who had become part of their lives, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Martha was there, laughing with some of the other women. The new school teacher, a young woman named Clara, was chatting with Samuel about books. Grace was outside with the ranch hands, probably trying to convince them to let her help with something. Rose was sitting on Daniel's lap, her head resting against his chest as she fought to stay awake. Tom Harrison approached Eliza, a glass of punch in hand. "You and Daniel have built something special here," he said. "This ranch, your family, the way you have contributed to the community, it is admirable. Thank you, Tom. That means a lot coming from you. I have to admit, when you first came to my place looking for work, I almost did not hire you because of Constance's objections. I am glad you turned the job down, though. You ended up exactly where you were meant to be." Eliza smiled. "I think so, too." As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Eliza and Daniel stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. Rose had finally succumbed to sleep and was tucked in bed, and Grace and Samuel were inside, cleaning up the remnants of the party without being asked. 14 years, Daniel mused. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean. So much has happened, but I still remember that first night like it was yesterday. You ever regret it? Staying here, marrying me, building this life?" Eliza turned to face him, her expression serious. "Daniel Edwards, I have never regretted a single moment. You gave me a home when no one else would. You saw me when everyone else looked right through me. You loved me when I did not even know how to love myself. How could I ever regret that?" Daniel kissed her, a deep, lingering kiss that still made her heart race even after all these years. "I love you, Eliza, more than anything in this world. I love you too." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, content in the life they had built together. It had not been easy. There had been struggles and losses, challenges and heartaches. But through it all, they had each other, and that had made all the difference. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that come with a life well lived. Samuel did go away to school, eventually attending a university back east where he studied law. He returned to Arizona as a young man of 23, ready to start his own practice in Tucson. Eliza and Daniel were enormously proud of him. Grace never left the ranch. She loved the land and the animals too much to ever consider living anywhere else. She married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man named Thomas Fitzgerald, and the two of them built a house on the Edwards property. They gave Eliza and Daniel 3 grandchildren, and the ranch became a multi-generational enterprise. Rose, the baby, grew into a talented artist. She spent her teenage years painting the landscapes of Arizona, capturing the beauty of the desert in ways that took Eliza's breath away. She eventually moved to Santa Fe to study art more seriously, but she came home often, always bringing new paintings to hang in the house. Daniel and Eliza grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared history and mutual respect. On a warm evening in April of 1909, exactly 30 years after their wedding, Eliza and Daniel sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. They were both in their 50s now, their children grown and starting families of their own. The ranch was thriving under Grace and Thomas's management, with Daniel taking more of an advisory role. 30 years, Eliza said, marveling at the passage of time. Where did they go? Into this, Daniel said, gesturing at the ranch, the house, the life they had built. "Into our children and grandchildren, into every moment we have spent together. I would not change a thing, neither would I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they loved. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. Inside the house, Grace was preparing dinner, and the smell of cooking food drifted out through the open windows. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Eliza asked. "When I showed up at your door," Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled. "I said you were welcome here. You did. And I have been welcome here every day since. You made a home for me when I had none. You gave me a family when I was alone. You gave me love when I thought I was unworthy of it." "You were always worthy, Eliza. You just needed someone to show you. And you were that someone. You changed my life, Daniel. You saved it." "We saved each other," Daniel corrected gently. "I was lonely and lost before you came. You gave my life meaning, purpose. You made me whole." Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder and Daniel wrapped his arm around her. They stayed like that as the stars began to appear, as the evening cooled and the world settled into nighttime quiet. This was their life. Not perfect, but real. Not without struggle, but full of love. Not the fairy tale that young girls dreamed of, but something better, something earned and cherished and true. Eliza had learned that beauty was not found in a perfect face or a flawless figure. It was found in kindness and courage, in resilience and compassion. It was found in the willingness to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless, in the strength to ask for help when you needed it, in the grace to accept love when it was offered. She had been shunned for her plain face, told she was not enough, not worthy, not valuable. But Daniel had seen past all of that. He had looked at her and seen a partner, a friend, a woman worthy of love and respect. And in seeing her that way, he had helped her see herself differently too. Now, as she sat with her husband on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the life they had created, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. She was home, not just in a physical place, but in the deepest sense of the word. She was home in Daniel's arms, home in the life they shared, home in the love that had sustained them through 3 decades of joy and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For opening the door that night. For saying I was welcome. For giving me a chance." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking it, for staying, for building this life with me. I cannot imagine my world without you in it." They sat together as the night deepened, as the stars multiplied overhead, as the ranch settled into sleep around them. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Inside, Grace called out that dinner was ready. Daniel and Eliza stood, his hand finding hers automatically, their fingers interlacing as they had done thousands of times before. They walked into the house together, into the warmth and light and laughter of their family. This was their happily ever after. Not a dramatic ending to a tumultuous tale, but a quiet, steady happiness that had grown over decades. It was a happiness earned through hard work and sacrifice, through choosing each other again and again, through weathering storms and celebrating triumphs together. As they sat down to dinner with their family, Eliza looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world. Grace and Thomas were discussing the ranch, making plans for the spring planting. Samuel had brought his new wife, a lovely woman named Catherine who taught school in Tucson. Rose was sketching in a notebook, even as she ate, her artistic mind never at rest. The grandchildren were giggling over some private joke, and Daniel was beside her, his hand resting on her knee under the table, a small smile playing at his lips as he watched their family. This was what mattered, not beauty or wealth or status. This, love and family and home. After dinner, as the family dispersed to various activities, Eliza helped Grace clean up the kitchen. Her daughter was chatting about the new foals that had been born that spring, about Thomas's plans to expand their herd, about the children's progress in school. "You and Papa built something incredible here," Grace said suddenly, pausing in her dishwashing. "I hope you know that. This ranch, this family, it is all because of you too." Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes. "Your father did most of the work." "That is not true, and you know it. You were partners in every sense of the word. You still are. That is what I want with Thomas. What you and Papa have. Then make sure you communicate always. Be honest with each other. Choose each other even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. That is the secret if there is one." Grace hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart." Later, as Eliza and Daniel prepared for bed, they moved through their nighttime routine with the ease of long practice. They had shared this room, this bed, for 30 years, and it was more home to Eliza than any place had ever been. As they lay together in the darkness, Daniel's arms around her, Eliza thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the desperate woman who had stumbled through the rain, begging for shelter. She thought about the scared girl who had believed she was too plain to be loved. She thought about all the times she had almost given up, all the moments when it would have been easier to just stop fighting. But she had not given up. She had kept going, had found the courage to knock on a stranger's door, had accepted the help that was offered. And that decision, that single moment of bravery, had changed everything. "I can hear you thinking," Daniel murmured in the darkness. Eliza smiled, "Just remembering. Good memories, I hope. The best. All of this, everything we have, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You deserve it all and more. We deserve it. We built it together." Daniel held her closer. "Together. Always." Eliza closed her eyes, feeling the steady beat of Daniel's heart against her back, the warmth of his body beside her. She thought about the future, about the grandchildren who would inherit this ranch, about the legacy she and Daniel were leaving behind. It was not just land and cattle. It was values, a way of living, a belief in hard work and kindness and the importance of family. She thought about Rose's paintings, which would outlive them all, capturing the beauty of this land for generations to come. She thought about Samuel's commitment to justice, to using his education to help others. She thought about Grace's dedication to the ranch, to preserving what they had built. Their children had turned out well, had become good people with strong values and loving hearts. That was the real legacy, Eliza realized. Not the money or the property, but the love they had instilled in their children, the example they had set of what a partnership should be. As sleep began to claim her, Eliza felt a profound sense of peace. She had lived a good life, a full life. She had known love and been loved in return. She had built a home and a family. She had taken the hand that was offered to her and had created something beautiful from the ashes of despair. She had been shunned for her plain face, had been told she was not enough, but she had proven them all wrong. Not by becoming beautiful in the conventional sense, but by living a life of beauty. By being kind and strong and resilient. By loving deeply and completely. By refusing to let other people's opinions define her worth. Daniel had told her she was welcome, and she had stayed. She had made a home here in this place, with this man. And it had been the best decision of her life. As she drifted off to sleep, wrapped in her husband's arms, Eliza whispered one more thank you to the universe for the rainy night 30 years ago when she had found the courage to knock on a stranger's door. For the cowboy who had opened it and said, "You are welcome here." For every moment since that had led to this perfect now. And in the morning, when she woke to another Arizona sunrise, to the sounds of her family beginning their day, to the warmth of Daniel's kiss on her forehead, she would be grateful all over again. Grateful for the life she had been given, for the love she had found, for the home she had built. This was her happily ever after. And it was more than enough. It was everything.